Our keynote speaker today is John Bates. As a leadership communication expert and strategic communications advisor, John Bates' highly effective approach, along with his coaching, training, and keynotes, is based in the neurobiology and evolutionary biology of how human beings communicate, lead, inspire, and influence each other. John works with forward thinkers and teams to help them change the world with their words. John supports many organizations like NASA, Johnson& and Johnson, Navy Special Operations, Accenture, Boston Scientific, Coca-Cola, Motorola, IBM, Air Liquide, and many, many others. He also works with many businesses and other celebrities like Dolph Lundgren, actor in Aquaman, The Expendables, Rocky IV, and anti-human trafficking activist at Casla. John is also one of the most prolific TED Talk format trainers in the world. He has spoken at the TED conference several times, and he has also coached and or spoken for over 35 specific TEDx events. John also coaches and trains for the TED Fellow program. John has also supported many, many high-level leaders in creating, honing, and delivering extremely high-leverage talks, interviews, keynotes, and other communications for their summits, engagements, and events. John has a unique ability to bring out the best and most impactful version of anyone's story. He is also a highly sought out strategic messaging consultant and pitch coach. He's the official pitch and messaging coach for Johnson& Johnson's J Labs, for the Cisco Global Problem Solver Challenge, and the ION Incubator in Houston, and many others. I'm honored to interact with John for the past few months. John is very humble, extremely easy to work with, and a very generous person. He proved that it is okay to fail because you will rise higher. A true leader who walks the talks. Please join me in welcoming John Bates to help us understand how to share our stories with the intention of connecting and making a difference for others, which is essential to leadership, life, and success. John.
Thank you, Shamala. Now, some of you heard the short version of this yesterday, but it's worth repeating. I got the opportunity a while ago to train a bunch of top leaders at NASA. And we were at the astronaut beach house, which is a beach house that's right on the shore there in Florida, right next to where they launch from. And it's the only house that is left on the shore there. And that house is used for the astronauts to bring their families together and have a special day and a special place to go the day before their launches. So it is a really sacred space. And I was pinching myself that I was there with this group of top leaders from NASA. And in the audience, unbeknownst to me, were two of the astronauts. And after the training was done, I was, able to enjoy the house for a little bit longer and mingle with people and have some refreshments and things. And two, good looking dudes walked over to me, great shape, walked up, short hair, kind of looked like astronauts. And they said, John, and they introduced themselves, and turns out they were both astronauts. And they said to me, John, we really loved your training. We thought that was fabulous. The neurobiology of all this stuff, it really helps to understand that. We're committed to applying this, but there's one thing that we're just not quite sure about, that thing that you said, tell your stories, talk about yourself, tell your own stories. Well, John, it's not about us. It's about the taxpayers who make what we do possible. And I almost laughed because it was just so cute. It was so Captain America, and it was so completely heartfelt from both of them. But I looked at them and I said, okay, guys, that's great. And I love that you understand that. And that is really, really important. And I get it. And here's what I'd like you to think about. You get to go up there and do that stuff. And I know you worked really hard to get that opportunity, and you dedicated your life to this, but you get to go do that. And I don't. And I want to know everything. I want to know whether or not you had a perfect moment. And I want to know if you were scared for a minute and what you learned from that, or if you failed and learned something. I want to know if you had a really deep thought. Like, I want to know all of it. And that's not about you. That's about me, the taxpayer. And they looked at me and they said, okay, gosh, all right, okay, we'll think about that. And, on my wall, I have a note, a framed picture from Chris Cassidy, who was just the commander of the International Space Station a little while ago. He's back on Earth, been back for a few months. And he said, John, I'm looking at it, it's on my wall. It's one of my most prized possessions. But he said, John, up here is where many great stories are born. Never quit, Chris Cassidy. And I talked to Chris a little while after he gave me that. And I said, Chris, I just want to confirm with you that this is you promising me that you will tell those great stories that are born up there in space. It's a picture of him on a spacewalk. Excuse me. I can see it, but you can't. It's a picture of him out in the blackness of space doing a spacewalk. And it says, up here's where many great stories are born. And I said, Chris, that means you're going to tell those stories, right? And he said, John, yes, you can count on me. I will share those stories, not for myself, but for the audience. I'll share them with the intention of connecting and opening something up for people. And that to me is what it's all about. Now, I want to pause real quick. And I want to go through what we did yesterday again, because I just think it's worth reminding people how much it means to everybody else if you would come on video. Now, you don't have to come onto video. I'm the one that's on the hook for the next hour. And then in the breakout session, the hour after that, anyone that comes to be with me, I'm on the hook. I'm fully responsible. I'm okay with that. You can do me a huge favor and do each other a really big favor. See how that just changes the mood when more people come onto video. And now I can see you. And if you nod, I'll know you're nodding. And if you shake your head, I'll know you shake your head, and you can wave. And it's just so much better. And by the way, you'll kind of, you'll see people and, oh, that person I recognize, I didn't know her name. And now you can find her and give her a chat, although you should be really paying attention to me, but I know how it is. So thank you all of you who came on video. And here's the principle underneath that. I would say never underestimate the value that you provide by simply showing up on video these days, because we all miss each other. And my goal when I'm in settings like this is to make it as much like real life as I can. I try very hard to, frame myself so that it would be the way that we would be seeing each other and get good sound and show up on video. So something to remember as we feel our way and stumble our way through this pandemic inflicted fast forward into the future. As an aside, I think that we have been fast forwarded at least 10 years or more into the digital future. If you look at it over the past 10 years up to 2020, e-commerce grew 1% a year very reliably, 10% in a decade. In the first 2 months of the pandemic, the first 2 months, e-commerce grew 10%. So it's like, I think the quote is attributed to Stalin. There are decades in which nothing happens and months in which decades happen. And in the first 2 months of this pandemic, we got fast forwarded into the future by at least 10 years into the digital future. And I think the saving grace is that it happened to everybody at the same time, as much as it could. And there's a lot of downsides to the pandemic. I've got family members in the hospital on a ventilator right now. And it's horrific. And there are still silver linings. And so I think this is how it's going to be, and it's not going to go away. I think hopefully we'll get back in person again soon, but I think we'll always benefit from the fact that everybody learned how to be on video calls. And the better you can be on video calls, I think the better you can be anywhere in life from now on. And remember, your leadership presence, your executive presence is almost entirely now about your virtual presence. So something to think about. So the astronauts, you know, they really genuinely didn't want to talk about themselves. And, you know, they had this great excuse, right? It's not about us, it's about the taxpayers. And yet I find in my work that that's an excuse that everybody is looking for. Everybody's got their own version of that excuse, right? I don't want to talk about myself. It's not about me. It's about the team. Oh, you know, my culture it frowns on people talking about themselves and everything. But that is missing an enormous opportunity. And there's a place that kind of a feeling comes from, which I want to address. But first, I want to give you an example that I think is just extremely clear cut about why it is so important for you to understand the value of your stories. A while ago, I was the MC for this very big conference in Los Angeles. It was a multi-day conference. And one of the things that they were doing was it was an entrepreneurial conference and a venture conference and all that. So in between speakers, I got to introduce all kinds of new companies that were launching at this event, using this event as a springing block. And one of the companies is actually still around, doing very well, I think, that called Dog TV. And as I did with everybody, I asked them, well, you know, what's up with Dog TV? But what I said, what came out of my mouth, and I felt sort of silly right after I said it, was, so what's on Dog TV? And the guy that I was about to introduce and have go on stage looked at me like I was a little bit dumb and said, dogs. And the minute he said it, I did feel kind of dumb for even asking. Like, of course there's dogs on Dog TV. And then it made me think, yeah, what's on People TV, right? What is it we watch all day, every day, day in, day out? We watch people. And most of the stuff that we watch, even the stuff that's called reality TV, all that stuff's made up. We are so interested in other people that we spend hours and hours of our time watching made up stories about made up people. Now, if you think back to, as I mentioned briefly yesterday, if you think back to the days when long distance cost anything, it cost a lot. And people would spend lots and a very high percentage of their income to talk to their loved ones far away and to talk long distance. And I think those things make it really clear that what human beings are interested in, what we love, what really captivates us is each other. And that means that if you can choose and craft and tell your stories well, you will be making a real contribution, not only to yourself and your leadership and how you get perceived, but you'll be making a contribution to other people and the groups that you care about. The big key is it's not about you, right? The reason to share your stories is not to make yourself look good. That's, you know, we don't really like to be around that. Someone who's telling us all the stories of just how super great they are and how awesome everything is. And oh, you know, look at me, look at me, look at me. And you know, if you're doing that, I think you all have high enough EQ here that you could tell the difference, especially if you just asked yourself, am I doing this for me or am I doing this to connect with people and open something up? Yeah. Those of you that are on video, you could tell, right? You would know. So just don't do the first one. Don't do the look at me, I'm so great. Share things with the intention of opening something up and letting people know about you. Now, this does feel very vulnerable to me. Probably you're thinking, it may not occur for you that it's as scary for me to do this, but it is scary for me. I'll just tell you up front. I'm going to ask those of you who were here yesterday to think back to that story that I shared in the opening. I've always been the guy with the soft skills, and I was always envious of the people with the hard skills. And I would go around trying to prove I was valuable. Like, do you remember that story of how I started doing what I'm doing? Okay, here's what I want to ask you. Take just a minute to consider whether or not hearing that story offered you something and opened something up to you about me. Or was it just me making myself look good and bragging and, me? Where would you say it was on the scale? Was it me, or was it opening something up and letting you know? So opening something up, I'm really happy to hear that. You can see why I was a little nervous, but that's my strong intention with that story. And in the breakout session about your origin stories, we're actually going to go through a very, very short version of that. And I'm going to talk about the pieces that come together in that story and why I'm doing what I'm doing very consciously in that story, so that you can overlay your story onto that structure and start thinking about an origin story for yourself that could really make an enormous, enormous difference. Because what I'm going to assert is that when I tell my origin story, that origin story about being jealous of the people with the hard skills until I realized, whoa, if I just got over myself, stop being such a jerk, I could actually make a difference for people with the hard skills with my public speaking skills and my soft skills that I had always undervalued, right? So when I tell that story, mostly I work with organizations that are very, very engineering heavy, very, very logic heavy. Navy Special Operations, NASA, General Electric Aviation, Johnson and Johnson, Boston Scientific. I mean, these are all very, very, and I know that it's a spectrum and we're all on this spectrum, maybe in more ways than one, but it's a spectrum between the hard skills and the soft skills. But I work very much with people and companies that are much more on the hard skills side of that spectrum. And when I tell that story, there's two reactions in the audience usually. One is, oh, I have the soft skills too. I know what he means. Oh, hey, good idea, soft skills guy. And then the hard skills people say, oh yeah, I know people like him, people that are jealous of me, that, go around trying to prove they're valuable. Oh, good job, John. You got over yourself. Okay, maybe I could be safe with you. And in that moment in my story, when I realized the power of public speaking at TED, it's a reminder to them that it's something that's available to them as well. So that story is very consciously crafted to open something up and connect with people. And there's, I definitely bring that vulnerability. I tell one on myself of, the evil part of me. And then I realized I could just get over myself and all of that, with the intention of allowing people that space and to understand me, because they're going to be working with me. And they always know it when I'm up there in front and we're about to spend the day together to do a large group training or something. So I want to get all that stuff out of the space and make it a safe space. And when I tell that story, and this is really important, when you tell that kind of a story, one of the biggest gifts that you're giving your audience is the ability to now share their stories with you and with each other. So that's another aspect of why you telling your story vulnerably, personally, authentically is such a gift to anyone that you're around. So what I would love to do is share with you two of what I think are the most important elements in storytelling. But before I do that, I just want to know if everyone is convinced now that even though it's not about us, it's about the taxpayers, that there's a real value to identifying and crafting and sharing your stories. Is everybody good with that? Have I made my case for that? I don't think I have to argue too hard with Toastmasters about that, but all the things that I'm saying here, anything that lands for you, keep it and share it with your friends who maybe aren't as comfortable, or who, like so many of my clients, say, well, John, you train the astronauts, you're a surfer, you ran away with your rock band when you were 20, you have all these cool stories. I don't have any cool stories. Oh yeah, you do. Oh yes, you do. Because you are a full-grown human being and you've made it this far. And here's a great place to find those stories. And then I'll give you those two excellent tools. A great place to find those stories is anything that you still remember. Yeah, I'm not even kidding, because there's so much stuff in your life that has happened that you do not remember because it really didn't have a huge impact on you, that as you scroll back through your memory banks, if you even still remember it, that's a really good argument that it's probably a story that's worth looking at and crafting and finding the point of and sharing. Does that make sense? Because you've forgotten most of them, but if they're still there, they're probably really good. And here's the big key. If it meant something to you, if it meant enough to you that it's still something you remember, then I double dog guarantee you that it will matter to another human being, because that's just how we are. If it matters to you, it will matter to me, because we are both human beings. And it could be in a galaxy far, far away. It could be from a country that I've never been to, in a culture that I don't understand, in a language that I don't speak. It doesn't matter. We're all human beings. And what we have in common and our connection to each other is so much more powerful than anything that we don't have in common. That story, that event, that moment that mattered to you, that you still remember, it'll have some value for us. Now, here's the big key when it comes to storytelling, from a guy named Les Brown, whom I love. Probably many of you do too. So he told me something so brilliant, and it's so obvious in hindsight, but it's really nice to have somebody who's an authority tell you this. So here we go. Number one, never tell a story without a point. Never tell a story without a point. That's a really good one. If you're going to tell a story, figure out some point. And now I would add to what Les says, don't assume that we can figure the point out for ourselves. That's a mistake a lot of these, especially hard skills, really smart, very logic and fast thinking people make. When they share a story, they think the point's so obvious that they don't say what the point is, and the point gets lost. So not only never tell a story without a point, but make sure that you actually tell us the point you want us to get. Good. Now, the flip side of that saying, Les goes on to say, never tell a story without a point, and never make a point without a story. Now, that's a harder bar to get over, but it's really important and very powerful for you to think about any time that you want to make a point. Go find a story that illustrates that point. If you really, really, really want to land that point, go find a story that illustrates that point. Now, are you guilty of sometimes just giving people the point without a story? Are you? I am. I know I am. But I have a 4.5-year-old son, and boy, I try to bring this to everything I do with him. If I want to make a point to him, I try really hard to find the story. Same thing with the people that are on my team. Same thing with the people that I coach. I really work hard at this one, and it makes an enormous difference. And let me tell you the neurobiological reason for that. Would you like to know? Because there's a really clear, obvious neurobiological reason for that. How did everything that we shared with one another, all that knowledge, how did all of that stuff get to us over our deep, long history before Google? I mean, the printing press. How did we share all that knowledge? Verbally, oral tradition, right? Now, sometimes people say oral tradition, and what they are thinking is, oh, we told each other, right? We just said it to each other. But oral tradition specifically implies storytelling, even songs, right? Like I think songs are just another version of a story. So in my book, story encompasses song. And the reason that everything came to us in the form of a story is because people can only remember. You're familiar with the research. It's why telephone numbers were what they were for so long. People can remember between 4 and 7 things. Have you heard that study? Right? It's why phone numbers had 4 digits or 7 digits. Well, guess what? That's been proven wrong lately. Very recently, that was proven incorrect. It's 4. Forget 7. It's 4. That's what we can remember. Now, that's not enough steps or things to share with someone how to brew beer or how to build civilization or how to do agriculture or how to build a cathedral or a temple. All those things that we were doing before the printing press, before everybody could read, all those things came to us in the form of a story so we could remember them, which means our brains have come over tens of thousands of years to more highly value stories than anything else in the world. We value stories because that's how all the important information came to us. Does that make sense? So, excuse me. So people say, in college, they taught you don't fall for anecdotal evidence, right? That means don't think a story proves anything. One story, right? Look at the data. Yeah. Well, they taught us that over and over, but they never taught us don't run face first into a brick wall, did they? Did anybody in any of your college classes ever get up in front of the whole room and say, now, kids, never? No, they didn't. But they did say, don't fall for anecdotal evidence over and over and over. Well, the reason for that is because we're not naturally drawn to run face first into the wall. We learned that when we were little kids. We stopped doing it. They don't have to worry about that in college. But because we're human beings, we will always be drawn to stories and the power of story. So here's my request. Please never use this for the dark side. Only use these tools for the light side of the force. Only use them for good, because they are very powerful tools, and story is chief among them. So we want to hear your stories. Your stories are your access to opening something up for people and for groups and for teams and anyone that you're around. You going first with a really good, well-chosen, well-crafted, well-told, vulnerable, personal story creates an exquisite space that people aren't used to, but they love. And stories are the absolute key to communicating with human beings, period. So would you like the 2 most fabulous tools of storytelling that I have ever found? Would you like that? Okay, cool. Tony, you're right in the middle of my screen. So if you don't nod, like I think everybody's frozen. So, all right, cool. So great. All right. So here we go. The two super key tools for storytelling. Now, the first tool is just a great tool. Okay, it's just an excellent tool. The second tool is a very dangerous power tool. So I will only give you the second tool if you promise that you'll be careful. And if you promise that you'll practice with it before you go out. You know, if you're going to juggle chainsaws on Venice Beach, you don't just start with running chainsaws and try juggling them, right? You put covers on them and maybe you get foam chainsaws first, right? So a little practice with this second one is going to go a long, long, long way for you. And what I didn't realize when I first started using this power tool is that I didn't even realize how many mistakes I was making till I recorded myself and listened. All right. So the first one, though, just a great tool. This is just a great tool. And this is something that all the latest movies are using. Someone, after attending one of my courses, sent me an email. Wow, John, you know, all the latest movies are using that technique you talked about. And you know what? All of the older movies did too. And it's actually been around since the ancient Greeks. The Latin name is in medias res. And the ancient Greeks probably stole it from somebody else, right? So in medias res is the Latin name for this ancient Greek secret that probably came from someplace else anyway. And what it means is in medias res means into the middle things, into the middle things. And what it means is that when you've got your story, start in the middle. Start in the middle. Now, I don't just mean start in the exact middle. For those of you that are very precise, that's not what I mean. What I mean is start anywhere in the middle that's not the absolute beginning and the absolute ending. Anywhere in the middle. And the best place to start your story in the middle is in the moment of maximum confusion or fear or worry or wonder or what is going to happen. So we want to begin the story in the moment of maximum curiosity, if you will, and then do not resolve it. Do not resolve it. So I'll give you a quick example. All right. Here I am on the hot savannas of Africa, and I'm standing under a large tree, and monkeys are falling out of the sky, quite actually falling out of the sky around me. I hear their little squeaks and thumps as they land nearby, and I worry that someone's going to break something. And then I see a giraffe walk smack dab into a big, huge branch and almost knock itself over. And then I hear a lion roar, but something seems a little strange. Now, I'll go back to, see how I don't resolve that? Now I'm going to go back and say, you see, about a year before, I decided I wanted to go to Africa and see one of those trees where the fruit ferments on the trees and animals come from everywhere to have a big drunken party at the foot of these trees. So I bought a ticket to Africa and I got on a plane, right? And I can catch you back up to that moment. And then I can tell you the big thing that happened, the transformational moment, and then take you on through the rest of the story. Yeah. So notice I start in the middle. I don't resolve it. I go back and tell people how I got there. And now everybody's listening to how I got there because they want to know what happened. We're super curious. It's like a cliffhanger, right? Start out with a cliffhanger. Don't resolve it. Go back, catch us up, then tell us what happened. So that's in medias res. In medias res, starting in the middle things and then not resolving it, going back, catching us up, and then taking us on through. Does that, excuse me, I think I'm going to sneeze here. Does that make sense? See, that's one I haven't had to deal with yet, is I'm about to sneeze on a big Zoom call. So in medias res is super ultra powerful. And the way to pick that middle point is just, what was your lowest moment in that story? Or when were you the most afraid? Or when did it seem like things were not going to turn out? And go ahead and paint that picture. And I'll say it again one more time, and I'll make a big deal of it. Big deal. Don't resolve it. It's very tempting to say something like, here I am in the middle of the Indian Ocean in 20-foot waves, which means the top of the wave to the bottom of the trough is more than twice as long as my little sailboat. And right, but I made it back. But see, earlier, no, don't tell us that, right? We know you made it back. You're on stage talking to us, but don't tell us in the moment. Do not resolve it. Set up the maximum tension and then go back. Use that tension to keep people's attention to get back to this moment, and then tell us how it resolves and where it goes. Good? Okay, that's in medias res, into the middle things. Start anywhere that's not the absolute beginning or the absolute end. Now, the second tool, the power tool, the dangerous but really awesome power tool, was in this story that I just told too. Do you remember? Think back. Do you remember what tense did I tell that story in? In what tense did I tell that? Present. Allison, I think I see you saying present. Lorraine. Yes. Present tense. Now, but when did it happen? Oh, it happened in the past, right? So it feels to our brains like we're lying if we tell that story in present tense, right? At first, that's what it feels like. So that's why this is such a dangerous power tool, because it's really powerful when you maintain present tense the entire time that you want to maintain present tense. But it is very challenging to do that because our brains keep naturally wanting to tell it in past tense. So I've actually had clients who didn't listen, which is on me. I'll take the responsibility. But what happened is they got up on stage. They hadn't practiced enough. They started out in present tense, went back to past tense, realized they were in past tense, came back to present tense. Then they forgot again, went back to past. By now, the audience is so confused that any power that had is lost by the confusion. Does that make sense? So if you're going to use present tense, use it fully, use it in everything you're saying as much as you can during that present tense moment till you go back to the past. Say, well, 2 years before that, that now you're back, now you're out of present tense. But really practice and record yourself a couple times. Because if you don't stay in present tense the whole time you mean to stay in present tense, it gets very confusing for the audience. Now, the other big thing about this tool is it's not appropriate, I don't think, for every single story. It's fine to tell some of these stories in past tense. However, the ones that are extremely personal and the ones that are extremely powerful and the ones that you really want to have people experience with you, those need to be told in present tense. So when I talk about losing my company, I start like this. I say it's early 2001 and I'm sitting on a hospital bed at UCSF thinking that I'm going to die. I've got a very rapidly progressing case of Stevens-Johnson syndrome that seems to have been brought on by losing my company after raising over $80 million and being one of the co-founders and the very visible face of the company. And as I sit in that bed, I think back on my life and I realize something really big for myself. I realize I've been tremendously small. I've been tremendously selfish. Yes, I want to take people with me, but it's all been about me. And I don't really know what's going on, but I think there's something bigger than me. I call it big is, the universe. And I say, big is, if you will please let me live, if you will please let me have another shot at this thing, I promise you that I will not be so selfish anymore. I promise you that my number one goal, always and forever, will just be to make a difference. And big is, let me live. I got to walk out. I was not okay for a long time, but every day since then has been like absolute gravy for me, because I learned that lesson. I looked death in the face and realized that this could be the end. And I decided to do something different. And that has profoundly and constantly and completely changed my life. See, I want you sitting in there with me in that bed. I want you sitting there having that experience with me, right? So think about the impact of the story. If it's something, another great thing when you're pitching, if you want to paint a picture of, or have the people that you're pitching, say for your company, to have the aha moment that you had you start your company. That's a good one to tell in present tense, how you realized that there was this niche and this thing that you needed to do, because they'll have the idea right along with you because you're telling it to them in present tense, and they'll be instantly more invested because they had the idea too. Does that make sense? Great. So in the breakout session, I'm not going to do as much talking. What I want to do is, with the people that come to that, we're going to look at very, very quickly my origin story and break down the pieces. Then I'm going to answer questions about your origin stories, and we'll go into breakout groups and share our origin stories with each other, and then come back together and discuss what we found. But here's why your personal stories are so important, especially that origin story. This is the best way I can think to say it. I'd love to know if this lands for you. But let's just say that these glasses make you look really, really good to anybody you're talking to, like me. Okay. If these glasses make you look really, really good and everything you say seem brilliant and all that, when you share a really well-chosen, well-crafted, well-told origin story, that origin story has the effect of putting these glasses on me. And now everything I hear from you or see from you after I hear that origin story is just that much better, because I am now forever going to see you through the filter of that origin story. And a quick example is that I do a lot of pitch coaching with companies that are raising money or looking for partners or all of it. And I do a lot of that in the medical realm. And I can't tell you how long people will hold on to the fact that the reason they're doing this is because they lost their dad to that malady, or they lost their aunt to that, or the real underlying reason that they're so driven is because they had some kind of a personal experience. But people hide that stuff. They purposefully don't share that stuff. But that's the stuff that makes the difference. You remember the yes, 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 no, logic, 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 emotion. Well, if you share a really well-told, well-crafted, well-chosen, well-crafted, well-told origin story, that is setting you up to get yes, 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 because it gives people an emotional insight into why you are the one for this and why you are applying yourself to this, why this. And when you answer that question authentically and with a connected, emotionally resonant answer, you will just always be vastly, vastly more successful. So thank you very, very much. Again, as I like to remind myself most of all, any difference that I get to make is purely a function of the generosity of your listening. And I very much appreciate the big smiles and the nods, and those of you on video, and, Anne and Ray and Rich and Andrea and all the people, Henry, everybody that I didn't say to, thank you so much for coming onto video. And everybody that's here and listening, thank you for being here and listening. I love that you are a Toastmaster. I love that you're willing to go to the gym on a regular basis for public speaking and communication and leadership, because all of that is how you make a difference. So thank you for your commitment to yourself, for the ability that it gives you to make a real difference in our shared world. I appreciate you being here. I look forward to seeing you in the breakout session. We're going to jump into your origin story. And thank you very much.